This is Houston. Say again, please.
5, Houston, we had a problem. We had a main beam on the level.
0. Roger, main B undervolt. Okay, stand by 13, we're looking.
Hello and welcome to this UFAH evening meeting. Today we have two very special guests with us today, and that is, as you can see, Donna Hare and Ken Johnston. Donna and Ken, welcome to both of you.
Thank you, Johnston. Glad to be a part.
If some of the guests here looks a little bit tired, because we have been trying to connect for about an hour now to make this work. So we have also Billy Carson with us. Hi, Billy. How are you?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me on.
Billy is a founder of Forbidden Knowledge and co-founder of United Family of Anomaly Hunters. We have Will Farrar with us today. Hi, Will. How are you?
Good. Only people that have known me since third grade can call me Willie. And my mother.
Billy is the founder of whatsupinthesky.com and What's Up in the Sky 37 on YouTube. But back to our two superstars today, Donna and Ken. You worked both at the Johnston Space Center in Houston, Texas. Let me hear a little introduction from both of you of who you are, what you've been doing at Johnston Space Center.
Okay, well, in 1967, when I graduated high school, I applied for a job at Philco Ford, which is a contractor at NASA, and as a file clerk. And as I was putting the drawings in the flat files, I realized I could draw these things. So applied, and the opening was in the graphics department. Went to work in there. And I had skill of drawing, so I had good finger dexterity to draw. And I got a job in there, and I kind of worked my way up through the ranks and became a graphic designer, display designer, and all sorts of things. Like they say, I had changed job titles several times to fit the different jobs that I was learning and doing. So over a period of time, I learned how to make the slides and deliver the artwork, and became, you could say, I had to get a high clearance, a secret clearance, because I had to go during mission behind the screens in the MoCA and deliver during mission. And even back then, they were worried about terrorists, so you had to have a secret clearance. Anyway, after that, I could access Building 8, Building 30, and several of the other ones on site. And I retired after 19 years of working for NASA, and building my own company, another company, and then I became a teacher for the final last years of my life here, retired now. So I had almost 20 years experience working there in different departments and facets of NASA. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a wonderful, wonderful job, definitely.
How about you, Ken?
Oh, well, I was, when I got out of the Marine Corps, where I learned to fly, and I had the opportunity to go to work at the Johnston Space Center with the Grumman Corporation as one of their first 4 civilian astronaut consultant pilots. And our job was to test the lunar module in the vacuum chamber and be sure it worked really good. And then we helped train the regular astronauts that flew it to the moon. So that was back in 1966. I left the Lunar Receiving Laboratory, the vacuum chambers at Cecil, and right after Apollo 11, because Grumman had to lay off about 30,000 of us, I went over to the Lunar Receiving Laboratory, and I became the director of the Data and Photo Control Department, which meant that I had access to all the original pictures off of the original negatives before any of them had a chance to be doctored. So I built up quite an archive. We got about every 3 years we get laid off and go to another company until finally I gave up the space program in 1980 and went to work for the Boeing company, and as a flight instructor on Boeing 737s for 14 years, and then became officially retired in 1998 and moved down here into the desert country of New Mexico. actually, the pictures and things that Don and I will talk about, in my case, I really didn't pay that much attention to them, kept them in archives until I was contacted about, 1995. And then I started looking at them and realized that pictures that I had didn't showed things that had been doctored and taken out of some of the original pictures. So I kept this archive that's now available to the whole world. I've made it available to Roswell and the UFO Research Center there. And,
to us, you are a kind of a god with all you have been doing, because I can tell you that we have been looking at your pictures, and we also have some pictures up on Mars.red. There is, if you go to Mars.red right now, there is on top a little icon saying Donna and Ken. If you click on that, you will come into some pictures that we are going to talk about later today. But first, I know that both Billy and Will have some questions. Let's start up with you, Will.
So it sounds like you guys were able to get the actual negatives first. Talking to Ken now, when you would get them, how would they come into you? Would they come in just these big canisters with rolls of films? And how did you manage to actually archive them without anybody technically noticing that you were doing it, or was nobody watching, or even caring?
No, actually, I think Donna would probably answer that better, because she was over building in 8 where the photo lab was. When I said that we offered the original negatives, I'm talking about when one of the scientists or anyone needed a photograph that was taken by one of the astronauts during the missions, they would come to me at the Lunar Receiving Laboratory and request it. I, in turn, would contact the photo lab and request that specific picture. And I'm saying those pictures were made from the original negatives. Later on, we found that had been doctored. And if you order some of the pictures that have the anomalies on them today, and you go and look at the pixels, you can see where they've smudged out or actually tried to superimpose other things over the top. But I didn't have access to the actual original negatives, but I got the photographs taken from them, and then I did get copies of the 16mm films that were made from the command service module going in orbit. So basically, we had access to the original stuff before it got doctored. In fact, that's one of the things with my mission reports that I just published. About every 2 to 3 weeks after a mission, they would issue a mission report, which if you go back and try to request it today, you'll find that even those have been doctored and changed, because astronauts would accidentally say something and they wanted to change what they said. So when you're able to get a hold of things like what Don and I have, you're looking at the original actual information that came back from the moon to us that were here on the planet Earth.
I see Will, he's about to pick something up there. What do you have there, Will?
My uncle used to do, well, my great uncle used to do it. I used to get these mission reports given to him from the Johnston Space Center. And a lot of these I've noticed have totally different pictures than you can find online now. These fell on me one night when I was going through his stuff from his Masonic Lodge stuff. And I couldn't believe that I found these. So there's actually, so you were basically kind of like the conduit between, like the liaison between the two. So Donna, did you actually get to see the more of the negatives that would come in and actually?
Well, let me explain. It's compartmentalized. In building 8, you might have a room with just these long cameras that could take very detailed pictures for the slides. Then in another room, you might have a big workroom where they're putting out the mosaics and doing things, and they show the film coming back from the moon. And the people in the lab there that were working directly on this stuff coming back all knew about the stuff. I personally worked on the slides, so I didn't have access unless I walked into one of those rooms that said restricted. And like I said before, since I had a secret clearance, I could walk into it. I didn't think they were trying to hide UFOs or anything. So I'd walk in and I'd see them. They'd have a picture, and I could tell in one instance, this woman was definitely covering up a bar that was man-made, an anomaly or an object on the moon. Now, we had circled the moon because we did every step of the way. We'd circle the moon and it'd fling us back to Earth. We did everything step by step to make sure we could get to the moon, land on it, and come back. And this was on the moon before we ever landed. And it was man-made, or an object that was not a natural formation. I saw her covering that up, and when I first saw her doing this airbrushing, because I was trying to learn this, she moved her hand to show it to me. These people, I guess it's done in plain view. In other words, you don't draw people's attention to it, and you don't talk about it, but at the same time, don't act secrecy and try to hide it. I saw that, and then I saw the mosaic, which was the man drew my attention to it. And I've already told that episode of what had happened there. And what I found out since, I've asked some of the techs, why you kept it secret? Why don't you talk about it? They're scared to death. One tech is scared to death to even look at me. Another tech talked about it. He said, well, they convinced them that this was high-tech information that Russia had. And if they're a good patriot, they'll keep secret about what they're seeing. They try to make them feel it was from Russia, and if they're a patriot, they're not going to talk about it. Then other people knew darn good and well what it was, and but they knew not to talk about it, and they were very frightened about it. To talk about it.
I would like to, sorry to interrupt you, but when you talked about a man-made object, a bar of a kind on the moon, what do you, Billy Carson, you're a founder of Forbidden Knowledge, and I know you have a lot of experiences, and you have been going through a lot of lectures, articles about the moon and stuff. What are you thinking when you hear about this man-made object that they are trying to cover up on the moon?
Well, thank you, sorry. Yeah, but what I'm saying is I think that based off of all the research that we've all done collectively, you, Will, everybody else involved in UFA, over the years, I really feel that we're looking at some sort of ancient technology from a civilization that either made it to the moon, or maybe another thing that we need to also consider as well is that the moon could have been a habitable moon of another planet and was brought into this orbit, or it could have even been created. Either way you look at it, there seems to be structures on the moon of artificial nature that have geometry that were definitely made by a sentient being, whether it be human or non-human entity. Nobody can 100% say for sure. We do know that based off of our research and what we've seen, there appears to be structures up there that shouldn't be there. If it was just a natural geological surface, they just don't belong.
But how about
it really, I mean, one of the questions. Yeah, go ahead, Thomas.
Couldn't it be so simple that in reality it could just be the Russians that has been there before in a secret space program?
Well, one of the things we talk about on Gaia in the Deep Space series that we're doing is the fact that it appears that the Germans had made it to the moon. They created these Hannibal craft, and these Hannibal craft, which operated on a Bell system, which we use a ferrofluid vortex engine for anti-gravity effects. According to the rumors and according to insiders and so forth, it appears that they may have made it to the moon and even to Mars. So it's quite possible that they were able to achieve that with the Hannibal 3, and maybe even the Hannibal 4. Was supposed that the Hannibal 4 made it all the way to Mars with using an anti-gravity drive with ferrofluid vortex engine, basically electrified mercury in a vortex with this other serum that was added to the mercury that actually turned it into like a different color. Nobody knows exactly what this serum was that was added to the liquid mercury, but whatever it is, it stabilized everything and gave them complete control over direction and the up and down XYZ, the point of axis movement. So it's a pretty exciting stuff.
Is there any one of you two, Donna or Kent, that have any knowledge about what Billy just said?
Well, since he says it was bell-shaped stuff, at the bottom of this thing, it looks like a bell-shaped part of it, almost like a capsule that would come back, you know, from the moon. And this was definitely a man-made or a physical object made. Now, I don't know anything about what he's talking about, but I do know that it sounds very likely that somebody else shot something to the moon and we don't know about it from Earth. I don't know. But it sounds reasonable that it's a possibility. But I did hear that NASA did what they call a ping on the moon, and they found that the moon is not dense. It's like hollow. It's not, for its size and everything, the density is not registering right. Now, that was a NASA project, but I haven't heard any more about it. So there's a lot of things that are kind of kept quiet, I think, that would challenge known science today to come up with an excuse or a reason that they may not be able to. So what Billy's saying, it sounds totally right on a lot.
I can jump in there for you. Now, Billy, I think both our space program, as well as going back to the Germans, their whole intent was to go and find out what was on the moon. And if you go back and follow the research that Zacharias Sitchin did, and take a look at the history of the Anunnaki that came, that Enki and Anzu went to the moon. In fact, that they stayed on the moon for quite some time, so long that the colonies here on the planet Earth thought maybe they'd gone back to their planet. The point is you're only dealing with the royalty of the Anunnaki there. You're dealing with Enki, and if they're going there, they're going to have hundreds of people there to build structures to take care of them. So what NASA and what Germany and what Russia and those that have gone to the moon, now China, are going back to those ancient ruins, and that's what we were finding in the archive that I've made public. And I know that Donna has come across a lot of those pictures, some of the original prints. So it's not just how they got to the moon that's so critical, but it's why they went back. And you were discussing they didn't ping the moon so much as what we did once we lifted off the moon and we separated from the ascent stage and descent stage of the lunar module, stayed on the lunar surface. The command module and the lunar module upper stage would rendezvous and dock, would transfer all of our lunar samples as well as photography work, and then separate the lunar module upper stage, fire the rockets, and make it impact on the moon. Now, part of the ALSEP, the Apollo Lunar Surface Experiments package, was on the surface, and it had seismic recorders to be able to record. So when the lunar module would impact on the moon, one of the biggest shocks they had is not like an earthquake where you see the little squiggly lines going. The moon rang like a bell.
Exactly. That's yes, that's it. That's what I was talking about. Thanks for explaining ping for me.
You're quite welcome.
But now when you are saying Anunnaki and what we're seeing could be ruins of Anunnaki and Enki and Enlil and so on, how can we be sure that we actually are looking at ruins? Because it could just as well be actual buildings. We are looking at orbiters images that are 40 years old now. Some of the best that we're looking at is actually from you, Kent. So how can we know that we're not looking at actual buildings that are in use now and not ruins, and that Anunnaki race could still be present on the moon or on Mars right now and live in these buildings and use these buildings in their daily doings?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't say that it was just the Anunnaki that have been on the moon. There are evidence that there are different types of structures that are there. In fact, that one of the best things that has ever happened with this archive with me, and it's whenever I had Brett Shepard was over and we were looking at some of my archive, and I'm showing him a picture from Apollo 15 of the command module coming around, getting ready to rendezvous with the lunar module. And now I'll say this, all you artists out there, you have fantastic minds, but you use a different part of your brain than what us engineers do. Brett's looking at it and says, but look what's on the lunar surface. Now, the number of the Apollo 15 is AS-1588-74. excuse me, 11970. So that's AS15-88-11970. If you look at that, right on the lunar surface is an alien base. Now, that's not old and ancient. That thing is, those domes are probably 25 or 30 domes there, and some very giant large ones that are there that are illuminated from the inside, and they stand out. So
that's the picture you are talking about that Brett also put out on Facebook.
Yes, he did. In fact,
if you go to Mars.red, that would be the picture that's named Brett, and it is number 2, Brett 2. It says so. If you want to see that picture, you can go to Mars.red, click on Donna and Ken in the top bar up there, and find a picture that's called Brett 2. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, Brett gets full credit for discovering that from my pictures, and he's done that for a lot of the pictures there, because the pictures that I saved have been kept inside of document protectors all these 40 some odd years, and so they don't have as much degradation or destruction that you'd find in pictures of that age. In fact, some of them look absolutely fantastic. That's why I recommend people just go to KenJohnstonMedia.com, and they can download for free the Lunar Anomalies and take a look at a lot of these. Since we published the book, there have been people contacting Brett and me saying, "Oh, did you look at this picture? Look what's there." And I just have never had the time to sit and go through and look at each picture in that much detail. But now they're available for all of you, just like Billy, that want to go and look for the anomalies and look for the proof that we're not alone. There definitely are aliens on the moon.
I'm pretty sure that we will make sure that everybody can get a link to your website where they can download your free book and some of the lunar images, so they can get a chance for doing their own research and comparing your images with the NASA images.
They find it, they get credit for it.
Yeah.
Billy, do you have any questions for Donna or Ken?
I have one question for Ken first, and that would be on the Apollo 11 black box download. It's a PDF file you can download from NASA.gov. There was a statement that was made by one of the astronauts. I'm trying to look it up here. I think it was on page 4. It was day 4. I'm sorry, day 4, page 96 and 97, where one of the astronauts, I'm not sure exactly which one's talking here, but he goes, there must be nothing more desolate than to be inside of one of those craters. And then he goes, the conical ones. This is on the NASA official black box. And then the other guy goes, the people that live in there probably never get out.
That was Buzz Aldrin that made that statement. In fact, that one of the best things last year, Buzz Aldrin came forward and discussed as he called it, an unidentified flying object that tracked them, followed them from leaving Earth orbit all the way to going into orbit around the moon. So the truth is coming out. The truth is out there, and it's finally becoming public.
Yeah, amazing stuff. And Don, a quick question for you. When you were doing the the imaging of the photos, when you were pulling the photos down, so basically what happened when you got to you were just dealing only with the actual, you weren't dealing with the hard photo, you were actually dealing with the negatives only, pretty much, is what you were doing.
Actually, I wasn't dealing with any of the photographs coming back from the mission. I was doing graphic art. I was doing the 10 by 20 foot screen that was the informational guidelines of what's the mission, how it should go. I stepped into these areas accidentally. I kind of slipped through. I didn't have their orientation of don't talk about this.
Right.
And so, and when I left, my orientation said, don't talk about your Department of Defense job or any jobs that you worked on in the sense of details. So I've never talked about those jobs, but they, I am sure, had to not talk about the UFOs. They dealt with the photographs. I was in graphics, so it was kind of separated, and I only, when I wandered into those areas, discovered the UFO pictures and things. And being covered up and being told they were covered up. So, and like I say, I talked to some of the techs, and they were real scared. Some of them were really scared to talk to me. And then others would get me aside and say, look, you know, that we were told the Russians, this is Russian stuff and we can't talk about it. We're patriots. And so they kind of handle people differently according to how they think they can work them to keep quiet. I just slipped through the cracks, you know, because I didn't work on that stuff. See, if I'd have been working on it, I'm sure they'd have shut me up.
Billy, to further answer that question, Billy, the ones that I actually observed that were painting out images that were on the surface as well as in the sky, if you call it that, above the surface, they weren't using the actual negatives. They would have an 8x10 enlargement of either a 70mm Hasselblad or a 35mm or one of the negatives. They would blow it up, and that way they could go in minute detail and paint out various items that they wanted to not disclose. And then they would shrink that back, and then they reproduce a new negative, and then make prints off of that. That's the process they used.
Okay, that's kind of what I was trying to figure out. How are they? Because without Photoshop back then, how do you blur these things out?
That they painted them out because they had enlarged negatives. And then also they did smudging where they would kind of,
Well, that's what I saw being taken out. That's what I saw. That I was trying to learn how to, Billy, I'm sorry I interrupted you, but I walked in, I wanted to learn how to airbrush, and I walked into one of the rooms off from the photographic labs, and the older woman was, she had a picture or a negative, and she had black opaque, and she was going around in a circle, and that's when I saw that bar on that one particular picture with that anomaly that's not a natural anomaly. And she was going around in a circle, and she let me see it. And it was burned into my mind, and then when Brett sent me the picture, I realized that's what I saw being covered up. And
that was a paperclip.
That is picture number 8 of Brett's on the page that we are also having in the background here now.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. I would like to ask. We were talking about the moon, and we were talking about the gray moon, black and white. But how about the rumors of the moon actually having colors, just like here on Earth? Does anyone of you know anything about that?
I was going to say there are colors on the lunar surface, but then when you're dealing with zero atmosphere, basically, and deep space being absolutely totally black, other than the stars and things on there, unless you're in the proper sun angle so that you can see some of the details in the color, particularly the best example would be when Apollo 17 was doing their sample collection, and astronaut Dr. Harrison Schmitt removed the surface layer of the dirt, I'll call it. By the way, you have to realize the moon has been vacant of an atmosphere for thousands and thousands of years, and you've had the solar radiation burning the surface. But when you remove some of that surface, you see a lot of colors, a lot of different colors. And so you can see in some areas for some of the rocks and things, you get some tints, some blues, some of the crystals and things have different colors and shades to them. So to say that it's all black and white is not quite accurate, but you have to know what it is you're looking at.
Great,
Yeah, that's true.
great. Will, do you have anything you want to ask about?
The colors always fascinated me, especially because I know the Hasselblad then came back in color. That makes sense though, since even the littlest of particles are coming in and putting that dust film on everything. So basically, if you get out there and move it aside on a rock, you can find yourself more and more color there.
Right.
A little bit more about the imaging. So basically, you would take these. I'm looking now. I downloaded the 18-page book here. Most of these were your actual photos that you were able to take out of the Johnston Space Center, or that somehow made its way out? Some of these are pretty amazing.
I'm guilty as charged. Being the director of the Native Photo Control Department, I had a little leeway. In fact, that one of the interesting parts is we were looking at the expense and cost of publishing pictures in color when they weren't necessary, and I did a research and issued a paper showing that we could take positive the color negatives, producing black and whites for those that only needed black and white pictures. But then when we needed color, you could use the same negatives. So, in fact, I got a $1,000 bonus for coming up with that system. You were talking about these pictures. These pictures are, whenever I would order a set of pictures for one of the scientists from around the world, their particular ones, and they wanted to see pictures of the lunar surface from orbit, so they had a general idea of the terrain where their sample came from, as well as Hasselblad pictures on the lunar surface that the astronauts would take, so they had the proper orientation of their sample. And those pictures, when I'd order them, I always had an extra set. Here's the key thing here. I had 5 complete sets of all of the pictures taken during each mission that I was part of. And I kept them in filing cabinets, so when we had scientists that would come in, they would want to have these pictures, so I could just pull them from the file, put them together, set, and they were happy with it, and I got accommodation for that. So whenever the debunkers say I wasn't there at South, I got all the documents to prove it. Anyway, so I would also keep one for a control, if you would call it, a master set. And then along about Apollo 14, the end of Apollo 14, Mr. Bud LaScala from Brown Root Northwood came in and told me to dispose of all of the pictures except for one set. Well, I didn't consider my set as part of those 5 sets. So I tried my best to get them, let me to donate them to one of the universities or several universities that had science departments that needed them. In fact, so I finally had to give up, and I said, okay. And I tossed and threw 3 complete sets into the Dempsey dumpsters. I kept one set that I gave to Oklahoma City University for their science department, and I kept the one set that was in our files at the data and photo control department that I had. But my private set I had kept secret and safe. And of course, we all got laid off at the end of each mission or each phase of contracts. And so I just kept those with me for all those years. And about 40 years later, I ran into, that would have been 1995, a man by the name of Richard C. Hoagland, when I went to get him to autograph his book. And I told him what I had. And of course, he just was wild with the pictures. And I provided him with letting him look from my archive and find those. In fact, most of those pictures of the lunar surface came from my archive. And some of them I never got back. I tried to get him to get back to me. Well, they're in the file someplace. We don't know where they're at. Well, fortunately, I had scanned most of them. So to answer the question, how did I do it? I'm a pack rat. I kept them, and I'm proud of it. And they're out there for the world to see now, and I don't have to worry about them bumping me off, because what good would it do them?
We are glad that you did what you did, that's for sure. Ken, I have an extra question here for you. Do you have any pictures that we haven't seen in public yet, or is there something coming up later from you?
Well, I can say this, that Brett Shepard, excuse me, and his organization are going through my archive, and they're finding evidence of extraterrestrials as well as lunar bases and things that I've never looked at, because it wasn't my thing to go looking for them. I mean, there were things that looked out of, like the paperclip that Donna talks about. More pictures, I would say yes, there are more pictures coming out, and one of the other best ones, if you want to know what it was that NASA and the government did not want you to see on the lunar surface, look in the visor of the astronaut having his picture taken. And a perfect example was on Apollo 12, and we found the same thing on other pictures too. The number is AS12-48-7071. And they're looking in the astronauts. You see the picture of the astronaut back in the back that's taking the picture. You see the astronaut standing there with the lunar module in the back, and you look at his visor, and up in the corner of the visor, you see this image of something that's actually suspended.
We are coming back to that picture in just a minute, because we're going to take a little break, and we will be back after this little video showing who the members of United Family of Anomaly Hunters are. See you in 1 minute.